Hi everyone, sorry about that, reconnecting. It's Naomi Wolf again, live from Civic Hall. It's the Daily Clout Shout, and today I have a really special guest, as I was saying. Kristen Rouse of the New York City Veterans Alliance is here to talk to us about something quite amazing. I pounced on her and dragged her over here because I found out that she's actually training dozens of veterans across the country, transpartisan, to run for elected office. So we've got this special guest here today, and as I was saying before we had tech issues, in a democracy there should be something for everyone, and it is no small thing. There should be legislation, there should be candidates, there should be campaigns that are specifically focused on veterans, because millions of American citizens have served their country by putting on a uniform and going into harm's way or supporting the troops at home in other capacities. So, Kristen Rouse, welcome to the Daily Clout Shout.
Thank you so much. It is fantastic to see what we have right here before us at Civic Hall.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on.
So it's a pleasure, and let me get right to it. You started an organization called the New York City Veterans Alliance, is that correct?
Yeah, so the New York City Veterans Alliance, we're relatively new, and we're housed here at Civic Hall. We founded this in order to have a policy advocacy voice here in New York City. We're America's largest city. We're home to more than 220,000 veterans right here in New York City. And we wanted to have a policy voice to not just speak up for veterans at City Hall and with City Council, but to empower veterans and their families to come in and advocate for better legislation to improve the lives of veterans and their families right here at home, and also to get them empowered to learn more about government, to be more active in government, and also to train them how to run for elected office from the City Council level on up to Congress.
That's so amazing. And do me a favor, look at me
All right.
when I'm talking to you, and then we
Super.
can look at the audience when they call in.
Sure.
Not to hog your attention, but
I'll talk to everybody.
Okay, great. So we hear a lot, those of us who are not veterans hear a lot mostly about certain common problems that veterans have, usually with medical benefits, but I want to ask you, what in your view are some of the things in your experience, or some of the themes that come up most when you seek to advocate for veterans or train veterans to advocate for other veterans?
Well, so access to healthcare and mental health care in particular are definitely major issues. Veterans are at far greater risk for suicide than our civilian counterparts, especially women veterans.
Really?
We're at far greater risk than our civilian counterparts for suicide. Currently, the statistic is 20 veterans per day take their own lives.
Good God!
A lot of those veterans.
Extraordinary. Where's that statistic from?
So that is from the VA. That's how they're
Whoa.
quantifying it, and so it
20
could,
a day,
20 a
and
day.
that is not our biggest national emergency. That 20 veterans a day are killing themselves.
It's huge, and so there's been a lot of resources put into place by the VA and locally as well. Right here in New York City, we have very effective VA medical centers. We also have vet centers, which are VA funded, but they're separate from the medical centers. And then there's other nonprofit resources like NYU Langone's Military Family Clinic, New York Presbyterian's Military Wellness Center, and Headstrong. These are different programs that serve veterans and aim to do so free and with minimal red tape.
Well, let me just jump in, and I mean, it's stunning what you just told me, Kristen. 20 veterans a day are killing themselves,
Yes.
women more than men.
Yes.
Why do you think more, and I just want to tie this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make you only look at me, you can look at the audience as well. Why, I want to tie it to an interview we did earlier with candidate Jonathan Dozier, who's running for Congress, again, a grassroots candidate, not someone, fed by the establishment. And his issue is very similar, it's very parallel. It's he's saying that vets aren't being well served by the VA, and that there are lines, around the block, and the biggest issue is mental health. And so tell me more about that. How could it be that so many veterans are killing themselves? 20 a day, what is the math on that? That's hundreds a year. That's like 600 6,000 people a year killing themselves. 6,000 people a year killing themselves.
It is a huge problem, and it's something that is I mean, fortunately getting more attention and awareness, especially within the veterans community. A large part of that number, a large part of that 20 a day are veterans who are over age 60.
Oh,
and
really?
so many of them are of the Vietnam generation, and also keep in mind that these are the veterans who, if they are still alive, many of them are suffering from debilitating health effects from Agent Orange.
Oh gosh!
And
like what? Can you name some of those for our audience?
Cancer most prevalently, and a number of other issues from like skin issues to cancer.
What kind of skin issues?
I'd have to look up the specifics on that, but there are dozens of presumptive illnesses that the federal government took a very long time to recognize, and really even only recently the VA has said, okay, we do recognize that this was caused by Agent Orange in the 70s, in the 60s and the 70s, and now we will give you free treatment for this.
So for younger viewers, what is Agent Orange, very briefly?
So Agent Orange was an herbicide that was dropped on the jungles of Vietnam to clear the brush, so that ostensibly you could see the enemy that you were fighting, but in so doing, it killed off the vegetation, but it also had debilitating, lasting, generational consequences on not just Vietnam veterans, but also the people of Vietnam.
Right. So there's Agent Orange, and isn't there also Gulf War syndrome as a issue?
And so that's a similarly politically treated, in that the VA has taken an extremely long time to recognize issues related to specifically to the Gulf War in 1990 and 1991 in Kuwait,
right.
and so those illnesses were suspected to be caused by radiation.
Oh God!
And
why were they exposed to radiation in the Gulf War?
Well, so Saddam had a number of chemical and radiological weapons, and there's also like depleted uranium, but like chemical and radiological weapons that were on site that troops were exposed to, that wasn't acknowledged until many years later.
Good heavens. So the U.S. government presumably knew, and I'm speaking for myself, I know you're not speaking for the military, and I just want to make that clear. Ms. Rouse was a sergeant in the military, is that correct? Lieutenant?
So I've been many things. So I was enlisted. I was a private first class specialist sergeant. Then I became a lieutenant, and then a captain is the highest rank.
You're technically Captain Rouse, correct? But you're not speaking for the military.
Correct.
So Ms. Rouse has served in many. Captain Rouse has served in many different capacities in the military. So I think that goes to your credibility, and quite senior capacities. And what I'm hearing is very shocking to me. It sounds like in both cases the U.S. government had some idea that these substances were toxic or dangerous to the men and women that they were sending into the field, but it wasn't until many years later, after veterans began suffering from these very dire health consequences, that the Veterans Administration, which is the voice of the government in treating veterans, right, said, yes, this is a thing, we're going to treat it, we know what caused it, we're taking responsibility. Is that a fair way to sum it up?
I think, in all fairness, some of it is because the government relied on studies that were incorrect. And so
funded by Monsanto.
So I can't say. I don't know that any of us can say definitively that this was any kind of ill will by the government. But it is
slow.
But the outcome is that we have many veterans who never received treatment or recognition of what they were suffering from for maybe even most of their lifetime.
Good Lord. So do you think, going back to the suicide issue, and I do wish when I had veterans on that were involved in the political process, I wish that the issue of suicide, mental health suffering, unacknowledged medical suffering wasn't so prevalent, but it seems like a huge issue that we need to face as a country and take action on. So do you think that the high suicide rate is related to not only people's health problems, but to the lack of acknowledgement, like the marginalization? What would you say is causing the high suicide rate?
I'm not a mental health professional, and so again, I can't say definitively. And if there was an easy answer to it, then we would have solved it already. So there's a number of complex factors, but I do think that just recognition and acknowledgement of somebody's situation, of somebody's medical situation, of somebody's service, of the contributions that they made. I think that it's critical because, especially the older veterans I speak to, many of them feel betrayed.
Do they use that word?
Yes.
Wow, that's heavy. That's important for us to know. I mean, there's so, it always amazes me as an American and as someone who hasn't served, but I really respect. Like, I am weirdly an old-fashioned patriot in the sense that I really respect. I don't like war. I don't like killing. I think nobody does. Paradoxically, a lot of people on the left have a lot of misconceptions, in my view, about veterans. And one of them is a lot of people in my little cohort on the left think that veterans like war, and actually no one dislikes war as much as people who have had to go be in combat, in my experience. And so I guess it's just so striking to me that this country goes into these paroxysms of patriotism, and whenever, especially when there's a terrorist attack, like, let's go get them, let's go send our men and women in, let's go, show the world who's boss. But then at the same time, the neglect of veterans, people who have been sent in when often, not military leaders, political leaders want to change the subject or for their own purposes, or their poll numbers, or this is me editorializing, their poll numbers are sinking. The people who are actually sent into harm's way are so quickly forgotten after those initial headlines are generated. I'm not asking you to comment.
So I mean, this is a reason why we want to see more veterans in office.
Let's talk about that.
So in recent years, we've seen at a low point the number of veterans serving in Congress.
Really?
The lowest point since World War II.
No kidding.
So this last November, there's been a slight uptick in the numbers. So this isn't the lowest number, but we are in a low point.
Like, what percentage of people serving in Congress are veterans right now?
The percentage I don't have offhand. I'd have to look that up for you. But this has definitely been a slump.
Right.
But we are now starting to see this new generation of veterans wanting to be politically engaged because
younger people.
We've been at war for 17 years. I myself deployed 3 times to Afghanistan, and this is a conflict that I'm very personally invested in. But we don't have there doesn't appear to be a plan to end this in a way that respects all the contributions that we made and that the Afghans we worked with made.
What do you mean by that? So we have, sorry to interrupt, it was so interesting. We have a question from our beloved community member, Diane Poland. Diane, big shout out to you. Diane is a killer citizen journalist and researcher. So she says, what about the rape culture in the military? Is this part of the suicide problem in the military? And if so, is that part of the platform of the potential politicians? So that is an excellent question. We've done a lot of reporting here at Daily Cloud. I've done a lot of reporting as a journalist about how bad the infrastructure is. It's not great anywhere, but it's not great in the military, where so many there's such high rates of sexual assault, and often you have to complain to your senior commander about sexual assault, even if the assailant is your senior commander. There's been a little bit of progress on that, but not a huge amount. Would you say that the high rate of suicide among women in particular has anything to do with their experiences of sexual assault in the military, or does that not really come up as far as you know? And I recognize you're not a mental health professional.
So again, I can't say definitively, but I would be surprised if it was not linked.
Right.
While the overall number of people sexually assaulted in the military there are more men who are sexually assaulted than women.
Interesting.
That is a statistic.
Wow.
That the Department of Defense itself has noted.
Wow.
But
That's
given
serious.
that women make up approximately 15% of today's fighting force, and so women are more likely to experience sexual assault than men.
Got it.
And so it is absolutely a crisis within the military. I mean, this is something where we cannot have a strong military and have members of the military attacking each other like that. So it's something that has to be eradicated from the United States military if we are going to continue forward as a strong force for America.
well put.
But
it's a national security issue.
But again, it comes to recognition. Women are not as likely to be recognized for their service at all.
Oh wow.
Let alone to be recognized and understood for their experiences in the military, to include any traumas that they experience.
That's so interesting. I'm going to chime in and just say that, I think if you're going to ask people to kill people or to see your friends killed, you have a special obligation to provide very hands-on mental health follow-up, because there is no way people can be human and not have that be traumatic. I mean, the studies are in about PTSD and trauma, and I'm just going to add that there's more and more research on PTSD. We talked about it with Jonathan Dozier, and it has measurable effects. Like, you can measure PTSD in people's saliva. There's like higher blood cortisol levels in people who've been sexually assaulted and people who've been in combat, and people who've had to kill or had physical danger that close to them. It changes your body chemistry and your brain chemistry. PTSD has not been taken seriously, and it's a very serious medical condition. So let's see. Can you read it? Why don't we take care of our homeless vets and offer, what does it say? The best in mental health care. Good question from Renee Perpetus. Yeah, let me put that to Lieutenant Raps.
So here in New York City, let's back up and look at under the Obama administration, a huge push of funding was made to address veteran homelessness nationwide.
Really?
So that is absolutely true. We've seen it in New York City, where we still have in the hundreds of homeless veterans here in New York City. That is absolutely true, but thousands have been moved into permanent housing. And so the statistics for veteran homelessness here in New York City have been dramatically improved.
What's happening to that now that we have a new game in town?
So we haven't seen yet whether that's going to be changed. The biggest funding source has been it's called HUD-VASH vouchers. It's a joint program by HUD and the VA. So it's HUD, VA, supportive housing. So that's HUD-VASH, and so that's the biggest source of federal funding to move veterans from the streets into shelter and into permanent homes. And that's something that has been really working. And so again, it's not perfect. There's a lot of outliers. There's people still waiting on help.
Right.
But a lot of resources have been directed at that.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to give that. So all of you who are listening, this is really important. If you have friends who are struggling financially, who are veterans, if you have people who are in danger of homelessness, if you have people in your life who are homeless, the place that they can for now go to get help is, give that website again, please.
A
program?
myva.gov is where you can go, where veterans can go and look at the full menu of what they might be eligible for.
If you're homeless, it's not that easy to get access to the internet, right?
No, that's true.
You don't have a Samsung necessarily.
So, here in New York City, we can call 311 and get assistance from the city to access state and federal programs.
That's good, but for all the veterans or friends and loved ones of veterans who are watching, is there like a national hotline or helpline for veterans to get resources, or to find out where the help is, in their neighborhood or in their community?
I'm used to speaking to veterans just in New York City.
Lieutenant Krause, I'm sorry, I need you to tell. I had asked, is there like a national hotline?
That's a great.
She's looking it up.
That's a great question.
All right, so
and there's also a suicide hotline.
And a suicide hotline, which we're going to share with you. So let me turn to more happy and empowering news, which is this incredible. This is why I pounced on, this fellow community member here on Civic Hall when I found out that this weekend, everyone, if you're not in New York City, if you're a veteran, if you want to run for office, get on a train, get on a bus, get in your car if you have one, get to New York by Friday, because there is the first ever New York City training program that Lieutenant Rouse and her colleagues are putting together to teach you how to run for elected office, to teach you, and it is your job. So tell us about what you're doing this weekend.
So we are partnering with an organization called Veterans Campaign, which is in Washington, D.C., and we're partnering with Civic Hall right here to bring to Civic Hall the New York City Veteran Candidate Workshop.
Seeing a lot of thumbs up.
And so we currently have 40 veterans signed up, and we're also including spouses, so that because the spouses spouses of veterans
part of the
serve
deal,
too.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we are going to train them how, like, we're going to give them the basics of how to run for elected
A lot
office.
of thumbs up out there.
And so we're making this happen, and we're going to provide everything from, why run? How do you launch your campaign? How do you tell your story? How do you use digital platforms to get your message across? What are the specifics of running as a veteran? What's fundraising all about? How can you come up with a fundraising plan?
Wow.
How do you, like, what is the math, and what are the math and demographics of getting the votes to win? And then how do you put it all together? And so we're bringing in the best and brightest of campaign consultants, fundraising consultants, communications professionals. We're bringing in some
former
and current elected officials.
Oh my God!
We have.
Don't you have Chuck Rangel?
So we are kicking this off on Friday night again here at Civic Hall. This Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. We are hosting a special conversation on service-driven leadership with Charlie Rangel, who is a Korean War veteran who was decorated for valor in the Korean War, and then he went on to serve. Now you know.
Now I know.
So Korean War vet, distinguished Korean War vet, served 46 years in Congress. He's going to be joining us in conversation with Patrick Murphy, who is the first post 9/11 veteran.
Republican?
Both Democrats, but our training is nonpartisan.
I love that.
So these are our New York base. But Patrick Murphy, he was the first Iraq War veteran to be elected to Congress, and he most recently served as the acting secretary and later the undersecretary of the United States Army. So the two of them will be in conversation. We'll also have some other veterans on site, and we're going to have a showcase of veteran resources that are here in New York City
For candidates
or
resources
for
in general.
veterans.
Okay.
Yeah, for veterans in general. And so we want to bring the veterans community together here with anybody who's interested. It's free and open to the public.
Wait, you mean people who are not veterans can sign up to take your training?
We want
as a candidate.
Well, for they can come to the Friday kickoff event because we want to share this with our entire community.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, and so what veterans can add in leadership and experience in the careful consideration of when is the right time to use military force and what does it mean and what's the long-term consequence of military involvement. This is something that veterans, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or Independent, this is something that veterans uniquely bring to elected office. Is that experience and wisdom.
Kristen, I have so many follow-up questions. I know that I'm a democracy nerd because my heart is literally racing. I'm so excited about this program. One thing I really want to ask is a lot of people out there who are watching, and I'm sorry this is U.S. specific right now, but our intention is to go global. So we are going to be bringing these trainings to your democracy, in the next year or two, I trust, as we grow. We need your support, but right now it's U.S. And it's Kristen that's going to be training people this weekend. So a lot of people out there are very cynical about politics in America. They think that it's only gatekeepers with millions of dollars who can afford to run for office. It's gobbledygook. And I wrote a book called Give Me Liberty where I looked at how people can run for office if they're not highly privileged insiders, and it's so hard if you don't have people like you helping them and guiding the way. How do you, the SEC filing, how do you do that? It's so, do you have to hire lawyers? Can you have a bake sale, or you're in violation of the law? But a lot of people are thinking, I'm a mom, or I'm a, retired person, or I'm a janitor, or I'm a homeless veteran, or, whatever it is, or I'm working 3 jobs to support my family. I can't possibly run for city council, for Congress, for the Senate. What would you say to those people, and how is what you're offering this weekend challenging them?
I would say your country needs you. I mean, veterans are people who, when there's a war on, when there's an attack on our country, when there is something wrong, when everybody else is running away, veterans run into and solve the problems.
Makes me cry, literally
and so, I heard Jon Stewart once say, veterans are solutions looking for problems to solve. And so
well, in some parts of the world, in some parts of the world, not because of veterans, but because of U.S. military policy and State Department policy, people can experience another perspective.
And we are, people serving today and in previous generations were extremely diverse.
Right.
But most of us come to the military because we want to serve our country. We want to make things better.
Right.
We want to help, and we want to do right, and we want to express democracy and justice in the world, and we want to do that here at home. We want to do this in our neighborhoods, in our communities. We want to serve.
Why aren't you running for office? I would vote for you.
Well, I want to bring up the entire tide. I want the tide to rise with all the boats. I don't want my boat to rise. I want all of the boats to rise.
I hear you. I mean, I would challenge that. You know, women in particular always tend to say, oh no, I'm not going to be out front. You know, I'm going to be behind the scenes supporting others, but, you know, don't rule it out. But having said that, I'm asking a more kind of specific question about like resources and what's realistic. Why should people who don't have a ton of money or a ton of influential backers listen to this broadcast and think, I am going to run, I'm going to find out how to do it, I'm going to go to this training, whether it's New York or DC, or we're going to put it online eventually at Daily Clout. Why should they believe that running in a reasonable, serious way for office is not a pipe dream? That's what I'm asking.
Well, so I mean, get connected. There are political clubs, there are political action committees, there are funders who are looking for you. They're looking for you, and your country needs you. And
so if I don't have a bunch of money, how would I possibly run for office?
So a story that inspires me is Seth Moulton, who was an Iraq veteran. He served in the Marine Corps. He just seemed to people to be just a guy, just a veteran. Mm-hmm. He got recruited by New Politics, and he got asked to run. Mm-hmm. He went up against an incumbent who was well funded.
What part of the country?
In Massachusetts.
Oh wow!
But not in Boston. He's a little bit outer in Massachusetts, and his party did not back him. They backed the incumbent.
Oh wow!
Who he ran against and won against.
No kidding.
And so so it's possible to be the dark horse and win if you have the story, if you have the commitment, if you have the drive, if you have the service, if you want to serve your country, come and do this.
So it sounds like you're saying that you're going to teach people practical skills to fundraise, to do their materials, to go through the filing process. Do you give them mentors as they go forward, or they are on their own after they go through your training?
So part of why we want to have people come in person to this is that we want to build a community. We're trying to build a movement, and so we want you to meet everybody we know. And as we keep growing in the network and influence, we want to grow this community so that's more people who can help you.
So exciting. And so quick question: do you think that if there were more veterans in elected office, especially not super privileged veterans, but people from all walks of life, we would actually use military force more carefully and judiciously and less randomly?
I believe so. If you look at the different, everybody's going to have a different opinion. I mean, there's veterans on both sides of the aisle,
right? For
sure. But there's definitely an understanding of the long-term consequences. Like if you hear, you may not be a Republican, but if you hear John McCain speak about torture, that man spent time in a POW camp, an American hero, and he knows what torture is. And he knows how to talk about it.
Yeah.
Definitely on that topic, if nothing else, he is the conscience of America. And so we need people who've been boots on the ground, who've been out there, who know what it means, to be a de facto diplomat as a military person, and what that looks like, and how can we do better in the future.
And do you think that if there are more veterans running for office, that veterans themselves will be better taken care of? I mean, it's kind of an obvious question, but I assume that's something that's
absolutely. When when you've walked the walk, and when you have friends who've committed suicide, when you have when the folks are struggling, you are much more likely to help them.
Yeah, that's what's motivating Jonathan Dozier too.
Yeah.
So let me go to you personally. What led you to join the military? You've had 2 tours in Afghanistan? 3. Oh God.
Yeah.
And then what led you to start this organization?
So, I joined the military like back in 1994. I enlisted not too long after the Gulf War, and I signed up because I wanted to serve. I wanted to do something bigger than myself, and I knew that.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Florida, and so I knew that service in the military was a good thing. It would be something I could be proud of, and also it would teach me some practical skills. You know, that would help me get a job. That would help me go to school. That would help me succeed in life, and it really has. The military is part of who I am.
You're getting a lot of hearts and thumbs up.
Well, thank you for that. And so, you know, and it's and so many people in the military. Like, I mean, the military just isn't just a thing. It's a bunch of people that I would have never met in my life otherwise.
You know, I should disclose for journalistic ethics that my partner's a veteran, and I've learned a lot about veterans as a result. Because, you know, when you grow up in little bubbles of privilege on the east or west coast, you hear about people in the military much more than you come in contact with them. And I'd like to know, I mean, something that strikes me that I know now is that the U.S. military, whatever you think about it, is one of the most diverse organizations that we have in America.
Yeah, we have so many, there's so many immigrants, there's so many, I mean, like so many people move to the United States and then they choose to serve the country that they wanted so badly to be a citizen of.
Really?
And it's, it's inspiring to me. Like I remember when I was on active duty at Fort Drum, when I had first joined my unit, I remember there was a soldier who was promoted to sergeant, and I remember like the announcement was, you know, like this soldier, she started out her life in a refugee camp in Southeast Asia, and now she is a sergeant in the United States Army. Wow. And what a proud moment that is, not just for her family, but our country, because that's who we are. And so I've gotten to meet people, you know, from all across the ideological perspectives, all over all 50 states, from all of our territories. We have people from Puerto Rico, Palau, the Philippines, like all over, like so many American territories and friendly nations to us, as well as from places all over the world.
Yeah, I hear you, and I guess the other thing that surprised me that I didn't know is that I guess that the military considers it a threat to the cohesiveness of units when there's racism, or there's a very active drive to sort of break down or address racism. It's not perfect, of course, but because the military, considers that damaging to its larger.
We got a
goals.
job to do.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have time for the garbage, for the baggage that people bring to them, bring with them to the military. We have a mission that we have to put first.
So the reason I love Daily Clout and the conversations we have when we're talking about the Constitution and serving our country in a real way, the way our founders intended, is that I learned things I never would have known, and it never would have occurred to me that it's a really good idea to elect more veterans to elected office so that we can have more peace. But I think that that's a legitimate takeaway that I'm taking away anyway from what you're saying. All right, so then what about starting this organization? Tell us how you did that and why.
So I came back from my third tour of duty.
And what were you doing? You were moving around giant equipment and
all of that. So all of my tours, I served in. I've served a total of 31 months in Afghanistan. I mostly did logistics jobs, but
which means what to a non-specialist?
Moving stuff and people around, and taking care of equipment and making sure that it's dealt with in some way that makes sense. And so my first tour, I was a supply sergeant supporting medical teams who were spread across eastern Afghanistan, making sure that they had all the supplies and equipment,
Wasn't that quite
the uniforms
dangerous?
That they needed. It was for them. And I went and visited where everybody was, but mostly I was sort of like the bookkeeper for all the stuff. My second tour of duty, I was an officer. I was second in command of a company that provided resupply convoys and maintenance support for an infantry battalion in Paktia province, Afghanistan. And that one was, we were a lot more forward, and part of my job during that 9-month tour was I was working directly with the Afghan army.
Wow.
And so we were,
How was that as a woman? That's very interesting.
I had a fantastic experience getting to know my Afghan colleagues. These were, they were all men. There were no women in the unit that I was working with, but they came by and large with a very open mind and wanted to know where I was coming from, and I also approached it by really genuinely wanting to know where they were coming from, and we had a great working relationship.
I just want to note, again, many hearts are floating across the screen. One theme that comes up a lot in our Daily Clout conversations is that when you actually encounter the other, it does away with your fear of the other, and it turns out that the other is quite lovely, especially around the issue of Islamophobia. But that's an aside. Let me go on.
So that was my second tour, and then my third tour was in 2012, and that was when we had surged in Afghanistan, and we were pulling the surge back down, and so I was dealing with I called it the unsurge of equipment, and so we had a lot of giant armored trucks that needed to be shipped out of Afghanistan, and that was the more administrative stuff, shipping cargo back home or to ports around the world.
Well, thank you for your service. Your family must have been, very worried about you all the time. I can only imagine what your family was thinking night after night when they knew that you were in a combat area or close to a combat area. So thank you so much for your courage. Whatever I might feel about that involvement or about other involvements over the last, how long have we been at war? 17 years.
Yep.
And I think, I'm speaking for myself, I think it's too much, unnecessary. We are far less careful than we should be as a nation about when we engage in combat, and that's my view. But it is, the men and women who are sent out into harm's way need us to recognize their contribution and support them. Because one thing I also hear from people in uniform or from veterans is that they're not political. They're not crafting the policy. What they care about is their brothers and sisters in harm's way, and doing the job that they're sent to do. So I do believe as an American we owe it to our nation to honor the service of people like you. So now, how did you start this organization? And then we should take any questions and give people a wrap-up of how they can get involved.
So when I came home from my most recent tour of duty, I had a really hard time adjusting back home. I did have a job to go back to, but it was really hard. I felt left behind. My relationship and home life just felt like a wreck because I was so disconnected, and each tour it got harder to come back. And there was a lot I was mad at, and so I channeled that anger into doing better for veterans. I left my job, and I got more involved in the veterans community in New York City. Saw a need to have we needed a political voice here in the city, advocating for veterans at City Hall, and so that's what I've dedicated my life to starting and continuing and bringing in as many people as I can.
And how can people support your work if they can't be here to run or don't plan to run, but they want to help you? How can they send you contributions? Or
I would be out forever in gratitude to you. Go to nycveteransalliance.org, and you can see there's links to either join us as a member or donate.
Wonderful. So please do, all of you, donate to New York City Veterans Alliance to help them in their really important work of training veterans to run for elected office at the city level, at the state level, and at the national level. And it's not just New York City veterans you train, right? You've done trainings in D.C. Tell us about who's
we've taken New York City veterans to D.C. So Veterans Campaign is a D.C.-based organization that has been providing training for veterans for the last few years. We've brought them here, and we're making a New York City specific training workshop, and we have a lot of New Yorkers who are going to be with us this weekend, but we also have folks flying in from Nashville, from California, from all around the country, and so we definitely want this to be a movement that's nationwide.
Fantastic.
And New York City, I mean, I'm biased, I think we lead the way, but prove me wrong.
And then if someone lives in some other part of the country, are you planning on taking the trainings to other parts of the country if this continues to be successful?
So the training is available in DC, and Veterans Campaign does run trainings elsewhere, but look at our website and also look at Veterans Campaign .org.
Fantastic. So that's it for today. Haley, are there any pressing questions that we need to answer? All right, well, you guys have been wonderful as always. Come to the training if you're a veteran. We'll be reporting on it at least Friday night for those of you who can't be here. If you can't come and you can't, you want to follow up and you want to run for office, and we are telling you to run for office, stop complaining, right? Channel your anger into running for office. And if you're a veteran, go to Veterans Alliance of New York City Veterans Alliance,
NYC Veterans Alliance.org,
and veteranscampaign.org. All right.
Thank you all.
Signing off, this is Lieutenant Rouse of New York City Veterans Alliance and Naomi Wolf, live from Civic Hall. See you tomorrow.